Donald Trump is one of the most controversial political figures of our time.
President of the United States, Donald Trump.
Sounds good.
You don't know what he's going to do next, you don't know what he's going to say. But against all odds, he became the President of the United States. But how exactly did he do it? This is the story of how an ordinary real estate developer with zero political experience became the President of the United States.
To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people.
Said that you could do a better job at negotiating an arms control agreement with the Soviets than some of these professionals who've been trying to do it for years.
I didn't say me, Mike. I said somebody has to do it. If it were me, that'd be fine. I could do it. Somebody has to help this country. And if they don't, the country and the world are in big trouble.
This is the story of Donald Trump. Donald Trump was born in 1946 in New York City, and he was fourth of 5 children born to Fred Trump, one of Brooklyn's most successful real estate developers. So he grew up in a wealthy family living in a 23-room house. Donald's father Fred was a self-made entrepreneur who had fought his way to success. Because Fred's parents were immigrants who came to America with almost nothing, and Fred built his fortune through hard work, following a simple philosophy. You do whatever you have to do, say whatever you have to say, but winning is everything. And Donald was deeply influenced by his father's mindset and values. As a child, he often bullied his classmates and even his younger brother. So when he was 13 years old, his father sent him to a military boarding school to discipline him. In 1968, Donald graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a bachelor's degree in economics. And right after that, he joined his father's real estate business. Donald then learned the ins and outs of the business, and after just 3 years, in 1971, his father gave him his position of president of the company. And Donald quickly adopted a grand and flashy lifestyle. You see, Donald was an ambitious man who craved the spotlight. He always wanted to be associated with wealth and success. But so far, his father focused on building middle-class housing in Brooklyn and Queens, areas that weren't the wealthiest neighborhoods in New York back then. And Donald thought that building for the middle class was beneath him. He wanted to build luxury buildings and skyscrapers on New York's most prestigious streets. So he renamed his father's company from Elizabeth Trump & Son, which was named after his grandmother, to something that sounded bigger, the Trump Organization. And he moved with his business to Manhattan, the wealthiest part of New York City. After that, he started going to some of New York's most exclusive nightclubs with stunning women by his side. And soon, Donald set his sights on building something that would allow him to step out of his father's shadow. He wanted to build something grand, something entirely his own. And in 1974, 2 major opportunities came his way. The first one was the Commodore Hotel, a rundown property that was about to shut down. Now, Donald saw it as a perfect chance to break into the Manhattan real estate scene. But for that, he needed money. So by leveraging political connections and pulling strings for months, he managed to secure a massive tax break of $400 million over the next 40 years, which was unprecedented at that time. After that, he used his father's financial backing and made a deal with the Hyatt hotel chain to redevelop the property. And finally, in 1980, the site reopened as the Grand Hyatt New York, Donald's first major project in Manhattan, which instantly made him the king of New York real estate. But the second and even more lucrative opportunity was identified by him in 1974, which was the West Side Rail Yards. The rail yard was 100 acres of barren land of rail tracks that were up for sale, and it was the largest undeveloped piece of land left in Manhattan. So naturally, Trump tried to position himself as the top contender for the site, but the project was too large for him to handle at that time. He lacked the financial resources and the political support to take on such a massive beast, so he had to put his plans on hold. But life went on, and in 1976, he met his first wife, Ivana Marie Zelikova, a tall and striking blonde woman from Czech who he met in Canada. After a few months of dating, they married in 1977, and together they had 3 children. Donald Trump Jr. in 1977, Ivanka Trump in 1981, and Eric Trump in 1984. But transforming the Commodore Hotel into the Grand Hyatt was just the beginning. In 1980, Donald Trump began building the Trump Tower, a 58-story luxury skyscraper right in the middle of Manhattan, which reflected Trump's bold ambitions to dominate New York real estate. The Trump Tower opened in 1983 and was an immediate success. It became famous for its lavish apartments and office spaces, and it turned Donald Trump for an ordinary real estate developer into a New York celebrity. But he continued aiming higher and higher. In 1984, he entered the casino business, opening his first casino at Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, and soon he started making regular appearances on talk shows. He was a charming no-sense billionaire who was not afraid to speak his mind. So by the 1980s, Donald Trump had become the poster child of the hyper-capitalist American dream. He owned a skyscraper in Manhattan with his name on it, a glamorous exotic wife, and billions of dollars. So everybody wanted to be him. People would try to touch him on the street just so that some of his good luck would rub off on them. That was the narrative and personal brand he had carefully crafted. And in 1985, he once again set his eyes on an ultra-ambitious project that he had to abandon in 1974, which was redeveloping the West Side rail yards. But this time, almost 10 years after his last attempt, Trump was much more prepared. He had a plan, and you wouldn't believe just how grand it was. In 1985, by using his political connections and wealth, he purchased the development rights for the West Side rail yards for $95 million. And in 1987, he announced that he would use that land to build a mammoth real estate project called the Television City, one of the largest real estate projects in the US back then. It would have nearly 8,000 apartments and condos, the world's tallest building at that time, and a headquarters for the television network NBC, which was looking for new office space. The proposed cost of the project was $4.5 billion, an astronomical amount in 1985. However, it wasn't meant to be even the second time, because the project faced strong opposition from the local community groups as well as the city officials, who claimed that the massive scale would stress the city's infrastructure, clogging traffic and disrupting the neighborhood. Eventually, even NBC pulled out, withdrawing their commitment to relocate their headquarters to Trump's Television City. So Trump had to pause his grand vision for the West Side rail yards once again, but he continued his ascent nevertheless. And in 1987, he released his first book, The Art of the Deal, which became a bestseller and further boosted Trump's personal brand and public image. And this was when Donald Trump realized something that would change the trajectory of his life forever. He realized that people wanted to hear his opinions beyond just business matters. So he started talking about political issues. But what would surprise you the most is that in the 1980s, over 30 years before he became president, he was literally talking about the same issues. He used to criticize the US for having a weak foreign policy, claiming it allowed other countries to benefit at America's expense, where Japan used to be his primary target. He even spent $100,000 on a full-page newspaper ad criticizing US foreign policy. And while doing all this, he continued building his business with aggressive expansion. Suddenly, his name was everywhere. Casinos, hotels, buildings, vodka bottles, water bottles, board games. He even did a cameo in the movie Home Alone 2. But most importantly, this was also the first time he started talking about running for president. In 1990, he opened the Trump Taj Mahal, the largest casino in the world at that time. And 2 years earlier in 1988, he had purchased the iconic Plaza Hotel in New York for over $400 million. And almost as if it was a fairy tale, he had his then wife Ivana Trump run the hotel. But just as Trump had begun feeling that he was on top of the world and his success would last forever, things started to take a sharp turn for the worse. Because Trump's shiny empire was starting to crack from the inside. You see, by the 1990s, the public image of Trump was of an invincible billionaire. But all of that changed in 1990 when Forbes revealed that Trump's financial statements from the previous year showed that he was drowning in debt. And that marked the beginning of Trump's downfall. If the 1980s was a period of spectacular rise, then the 1990s was a period of an even harder fall. You see, Trump never really followed a disciplined financial or investment strategy. Instead, he built his business around his personal brand. Donald Trump was a symbol of success. Everything he touched seemed to turn to gold, with towering skyscrapers and massive casinos across New York standing as the proof. And banks and corporations were eager to be a part of that success. So they were always willing to finance his grand ventures with loans and debt. Therefore, Trump built his empire on this brand, relying heavily on loans and debt to fuel his expansion. Now, this approach worked as long as the economy thrived and the loans kept coming. But in the 1990s, the US economy unexpectedly slipped into a recession, and suddenly Trump was unable to get more debt to sustain or expand his empire. Since most of his businesses were bleeding cash, the debt that had once fueled his rise quickly turned into a burden. Suddenly, Trump found himself more than $3 billion in debt, and he had to take an emergency loan just to avoid personal bankruptcy. He had to sell his yacht, his airline, and even part of the Hyatt Hotel, which was the first major project in his career. His 3 casinos also declared bankruptcy, and overall Trump's companies filed for bankruptcy 6 times. Between 1985 and 1994, he lost at least $1.2 billion. But problems in his business also came with personal problems. It was revealed that since the late 1980s, Trump had been having an affair with actress Marla Maples. This led to Trump and Ivana's divorce in 1992, and she took a chunk of his wealth with her in the settlement. And in 1993, he married Marla Maples and in the same year had one daughter, Tiffany Trump. But the fall from popularity continued to be faster than his rise. Media and newspapers claimed that Trump's downfall was inevitable because his success was largely due to his father's wealth and political connections. People claimed that his image as this ultra-rich, ultra-successful business tycoon was fake, which was a major problem for Trump because his personal brand and image were everything. But in 1993, for the third time, Trump once again tried to renew the West Side Rail Yards project, although this time it was a much less ambitious plan than his television city. This time he called it Trump City, with fewer residential towers and office spaces and no tallest building in the world. Trump was able to get the plan approved and construction was set to begin in 1995. But the resistance and criticism against his project continued even after it was approved. And this time Trump did not have enough time or money to fight for it because he was busy somewhere else, trying to avoid complete personal bankruptcy. So after 3 failed attempts across almost 20 years, he finally backed down. He sold a majority stake in the West Side Rail Yards project to Hong Kong-based investors for $1.76 billion. But just when everyone thought Trump's time was over, he shocked the world with one of the most incredible and controversial comebacks in American history. Along with the money that he got by selling his stake in the West Side Rail Yards, Trump also took his casino business public and raised money from its IPO in 1995. And with some more financial maneuvering, in just 5 years, he went from billions of dollars in debt to an estimate positive net worth of $700 million. And he was now ready to carefully weave a comeback narrative and rebuild his personal brand and image. So in the late 1990s, he cleverly started spending heavily on producing high-profile events like Miss Universe, Miss USA, and Miss Teen USA pageants, and he also made a 70-story building that he named the Trump Building. But the way he scripted his comeback was absolute genius. He started building the narrative that he hadn't lost, he just wasn't winning yet. And he then released his second book, The Art of the Comeback, which reinforced the perception that he was back indeed. And this narrative not only opened doors to new business opportunities and positive media stories, but also taught Donald Trump an invaluable lesson. People love a comeback story. And as you'll see later in the video, this lesson would become one of his most powerful tools during his run for the presidency. In 1999, Trump divorced Marla Maples, and that was also the year when his father Fred Trump passed away. However, this was also when he met Slovenian model Melania Gnos, whom he began dating shortly after his divorce and eventually married in 2005. But more importantly, 1999 was also when he renewed his ambitions and started hinting at a potential run to become president of the United States. Now, although the two dominant political parties in the US were the Democrats and the Republicans, Donald Trump considered running as a candidate for the less popular Reform Party. And in 1999, he briefly launched a campaign in several states, criticizing trade agreements and foreign policies that harmed the US. However, Trump soon realized that because the Reform Party was not a major party, he had no chance of winning. And if he lost, it would severely damage his image and personal brand, something he valued above anything else. So in 2000, he publicly withdrew from the race, where he reasoned that there was not enough unity in the Reform Party to support any candidate. Trump returned to focusing on building his business and enhancing his image. But then in 2004, something happened that would change Donald Trump's life forever. A TV network called NBC launched a reality TV show called The Apprentice.
Reality TV series The Apprentice brings together 20 ambitious contestants hoping to survive in New York's corporate jungle,
where participants completed business challenges to impress a successful entrepreneur. And then the winner was given a significant career opportunity like a job or an investment. And for the first season, NBC chose Donald Trump as the show's judge, and it was an instant and massive hit. Trump quickly became a household name with his iconic catchphrase, "You're fired." The show brought an average of 20 million viewers every week, who glued to their TVs and watched Trump in action as he became the real star of the show. Initially, NBC planned to rotate and bring new hosts, but Trump became so popular that they decided to center the entire show around him. And The Apprentice was one of the best things that happened to him, because he got to repeatedly share his comeback story and how he was using the show to teach others. It cemented his narrative and personal brand. And what also helped was the payout. Over the 14 seasons, Trump made almost $500 million from the show. The Apprentice transformed Donald Trump from a real estate developer into someone whose main business was selling his own name and brand. But Trump has a hard time letting things go. Similar to how he couldn't let go of his idea of developing the West Side rail yards, he could not get over his desire to become president. And in 2009, he once again started conversations about how the US was lacking and how its foreign policy was helping other nations benefit at its cost.
I beat China all the time. When was the last time you saw a Chevrolet in Tokyo? When do we beat Mexico at the border? They're laughing at us. They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
Although this time he had shifted focus from Japan to China. But this time Trump ensured that he did not repeat his mistakes. He knew that if he wanted to win, he needed the support of either one of the two major political parties. And therefore he rejoined the Republican Party. Now only a single candidate runs for the election from each party, but there are multiple contenders for the nomination within the party as well. So before Trump could run for the election, he had to beat other Republican leaders and secure that nomination. However, that was not going to be easy for Donald Trump, because still no one would take him seriously. People thought it was just a publicity stunt. Nevertheless, in 2011, Trump began publicly questioning whether Obama was really born in the US, which was a constitutional requirement to become president. But why is Trump always attacking everyone? See, while you may not realize it, but a major reason for Trump's behavior is his experience as a real estate developer. Because in the competitive New York real estate market, his success usually meant someone else had to fail. It was a zero-sum game where you had no permanent friend and nothing like a win-win situation. So everything was a transaction, and the only way to win was to tear down your opponent. But his efforts to take Obama down didn't really work, because Obama released his birth certificate and then publicly mocked Trump at a White House dinner.
As some of you heard, the state of Hawaii released my official long-form birth certificate. Hopefully, this puts all doubts to rest. Tonight, for the first time, I am releasing my official birth video.
After this, Trump was humiliated and he withdrew from the race, clearing the way for Republican Party's Mitt Romney, who would eventually lose to Obama. And for a moment, it seemed like the 66-year-old aging and humiliated Donald Trump had finally given up on his political ambitions forever. But it was not over yet. You see, by the next presidential elections in 2016, the political landscape of the US had changed dramatically. The supporters and voters of the Republican Party were frustrated with the existing leaders for letting Obama win. So by 2015, even though the dissatisfaction with Obama and the Democrats was at an all-time high, the Republican Party had no strong, charismatic leader to unite its base. And in 2015, Trump once again made a bold move. He announced that he was going to run for the 2016 presidential election.
Delegates and fellow Americans, I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
And this time, he was not going to back down. This time, he capitalized on the voters' sentiment and spared no one. He was criticizing Obama and he was criticizing the leaders of his own Republican Party. He said that his own party leaders were losers who were failing to stop Obama. And finally, the Republican voters found a leader who was voicing their thoughts. And then he made a battleground out of several key issues. The billions of dollars being spent on foreign wars that left American soldiers dead or handicapped, trade deals that sent jobs and money to Mexico and China, and the economy struggling due to Obama's free healthcare service called Obamacare. But most importantly, he was not afraid to say the most radical things, ideas that were considered off limits in politics. He gave Americans the best high you can get without drugs: hope. He gave them hope that he would make America great again. But the media still did not take him seriously. People saw him as a political outsider and a fool who blurted out whatever came to mind without any strategy. No one believed he would even secure his party's nomination, let alone go on to be the president. But Trump soldiered on. His blunt style and controversial statements that were dismissed by the media actually struck a chord with millions of voters. He eventually beat all other candidates and led a hostile takeover of the Republican Party, where the party eventually had no no choice but to hand over the presidential nomination to him. Donald Trump was nominated as the Republicans' candidate for the 2016 presidential elections, and there was no looking back. Once he discovered what rallied the people, he did not back down no matter how controversial or extreme his views seemed. He publicly talked about building a wall between Mexico and the US.
I would build a great wall, and nobody builds walls better than me, believe me.
And even proposed a complete ban on Muslims entering the US. While the media and the Democrats were shocked by these statements, ideas that were considered off limits in politics, the people saw him as someone who spoke his mind and ignored political conventions. It was complete madness. The polarization continued to increase as the voters kept rallying behind him and the media continued dismissing him, particularly because his opponent was Hillary Clinton of the Democratic Party. She had more than 30 years of political experience compared to Trump's 0 years, because she had served as First Lady when her husband Bill Clinton was president, and she was also the Secretary of State until 2013. But just before the elections, luck also favored Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton's campaign was handicapped by an FBI investigation into her use of a private email server when she served as Secretary of State. So suddenly her entire campaign was damaged by scandals and leaks. And eventually on 8th November 2016, against all odds, Donald Trump won the elections for the President of the United States, stunning political analysts and media outlets across the world. First, people doubted he could secure the backing of a major party. Then they didn't believe he could win the nomination from the Republican Party, and then they were certain that he would not win the election. But Donald Trump proved them all wrong, transforming from a real estate developer in Manhattan to the President of the United States. If you made it this far, subscribe here and follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The link is in the description. If you want to launch your own D2C store, sign up for my ecom masterclass using the link below. Until I see you in the next video, goodbye.